Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Fatboyz Dynasty Podcast, coming at you live on the YouTube channel presented by the Fantasyholics Podcast Network. I'm Bo. That's Brant. Big news in the NFL world today, Brant. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it came out. Stephon Diggs. We knew he was a little disgruntled there in Buffalo. Got traded down to the Houston Texans. It was quite a crazy turn of events to see that. It had been real quiet in the NFL world. A few little signings here and there, but nothing huge. And then boom, all of a sudden, one of your top 10 fantasy wide receivers, probably top 10 wide receivers in the NFL, traded off to the Houston Texans. Fantasy wise, Houston is building what could be a fun, dominant team to watch. You got Diggs there, Nico there, and Tank Dell coming back from injury. You had CJ Stroud with a huge season this year, this past year. This is the guy you could be talking about in the top 5 QBs this following year. And then you added Joe Mixon in the best possible landing spot that he could have went to outside of Cincy is Houston, and that's where he ended up. Houston's, and then you got to think about what they did. What they added, Daniel Hunter on the defensive side, and that's going along with Will Anderson. So I mean, Houston is making some moves the last 2 offseason.
Yeah, so I was going to say they're actually the first team in NFL history to add in free agency add a 1,000-yard rusher, a 1,000-yard receiver, and a 10-plus sack player this offseason. So they're just being super, super aggressive. So real quick, Brant, because I think the biggest boost that anybody takes out of this is CJ Stroud. And I know there's such thing as like a sophomore slump, and people get worried about those things. So let me ask you, in a dynasty startup, I'm going to ask you a quarterback's name. You tell me if you would take CJ Stroud in front of said player at this point in his career.
Are we talking super flex or one QB?
Single quarterback league, okay? Single quarterback league, dynasty startup. Do you take Jalen Hurts or CJ Stroud?
I'm taking CJ Stroud.
Okay. CJ Stroud, Patrick Mahomes.
Mahomes, I'm still keeping. He's still my 101.
CJ Stroud or Josh Allen?
I still have to go Josh Allen just because he is still that guy. I know he lost his best weapon, but I still think he is that good.
Okay. CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert.
See this one here, this is right here where I'm drawing this line, and here's why. In a league, I'm getting passing touchdown volume, more points than normal. I'm probably going Herbert. I think Herbert has the more passing upside, but along with rushing and everything else, if you got your standard rushing, TDs, everything else, I think I go with Stroud. If the rushing, if there's no jacked up in the passing yards and everything, I think I go Stroud. If it's jacked up for points for the passing touchdowns and all that, I think I go Herbert. But this right here, that's pretty much where I'm even at right there.
Joe Burrow or CJ Stroud?
I'm going CJ Stroud. Burrow's been banged up way too much. I don't know if I trust him, and this is coming from a Burrow owner in a dynasty league.
All right, last one. Your favorite NFL quarterback, Lamar Jackson or CJ Stroud?
Is this for the running back position? I think I go CJ Stroud based on age and the fact that they added Derrick Henry. I think some of that rushing comes down over the next couple of years. So I think I go with Stroud here.
Okay, interesting. I still have a couple of those guys above Stroud. I do think CJ takes another step. He cements his name in that conversation this year. Maybe supplants like a Tua or, somebody else who had success last year as well. But, man.
Got one for you.
Okay.
We're talking the mock draft. Do you trade the 101 for CJ Stroud, or do you take Caleb Williams in a super flex?
Oh, I still like the cast and crew an awful lot more in Houston than I do in Chicago at this point. And really, Caleb Williams at Chicago is pretty much the only thing we know at this point. So it's really intriguing this year with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and potentially adding another wide receiver at that 9th pick that Chicago has. But right now, I'm going to go with CJ Stroud still. So that could change potentially. I just don't see that happening, Brandon. So speaking of mock drafts, you brought it up. you and I, along with the rest of the Fantasy Holics team, put together and did a 2-round mock draft for the rookies. We're going to talk about that today, Brant. Some really interesting things that we're going to have to talk about here. You and I obviously will dive a little bit deeper into our picks because we can talk about the mind and how it worked going into those. But there's some things definitely to talk about here when we get into this mock.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun to get done. We were able to fill it up pretty quickly and get it done last night and had some time to look at it and everything else. And there's a few shocks in there, and then we'll follow it up by some names that we can see creeping into the top 2 rounds. So we'll discuss, some names we don't see there. We'll see some names that we may see there. Excuse me.
Yep. All right, Brant, you ready to get into today's episode?
Absolutely. Let's get our bibs on and let's eat.
All right, Brant. So let's get ahead and get into this. I know everybody's like extremely diving deep into these mock drafts right now. I've done a few for some of my dynasty leagues that I care more about than others, just because you kind of want to see where people are going to lay and where people are going to land. I know, everybody who plays fantasy football knows these rankings change pretty significantly after the NFL draft happens, but there is a talent hierarchy, if you will, that is happening right now. There's the combine news to go off of, and then obviously the team meetings. Basically, the only thing we really know at this point is that Caleb Williams is going to be a Chicago Bear, I would assume. The rest of it's kind of open up in the air. We'll see what happens. But nonetheless, Brant, it should be a pretty intriguing NFL draft. Be interesting to see how this mock draft we're getting ready to talk about stacks up in a couple weeks. But as far as the mock draft goes, it is a 2-round super flex 10-team rookie mock, Brant.
Yeah, it's PPR. And don't forget, guys, we'll be live on day 1 of the draft. The Fatboyz will be live with some special guests from some of the other fantasy holics. We're going to discuss every single pick, even the ones that don't have fantasy relevancy. We'll have a little discussion there. And we'll have this mock draft pulled up, and we'll talk about how some of the changes may affect that instantly as soon as that team picks so-and-so or passes on so-and-so. And you'll hear us with our Fatboyz suggestions on who should be picked. You'll hear us at our own GM way that day. So make sure you tune in. We'll be there all through the first round. We'll drag butt into the next day at work, but we'll fight through it for you guys and go through the entire first round.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like we did last year. I know Patrick's going to be on with us for sure, who's definitely much more appealing to the eye than either Brant or I are, but he doesn't have near the the food knowledge that we do. So, it's a yin and yang. You got to have some healthy looking folks on there, and then you got to have, some artery cloggers like ourselves. So we'll be there for you on the draft. Brant will probably be a little less calm or a little less excitable than he was last year when he joined us for a little while at the NFL draft. So, and we also do have a fantasy holic team member going to be at the draft this year. Derek's going to be at the draft, so we may have him jump on and go live with us potentially if that's something he's interested in doing. But we will see. It's getting closer. For us in the fantasy community, Brant, it's Christmas morning, and we're striking days off that calendar. Right, we're getting closer every single day. So let's get into this mock draft, Brant. We'll go 3 picks at a time and discuss those 3 picks a little bit deeper after they're talked about. So we'll start with the 101, obviously. 101, the most obvious pick of the entire draft, Jaden Daniels out of LSU. This 102, Caleb Williams, USC, and then you had the 3rd overall pick, Brent. You took Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State. So obviously, let's start with talking about the 101 here, and then I'm going to pick your brain a little bit on your thing. Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams. I don't necessarily hate it. Again, Caleb Williams may have some off the field stuff. We saw him crying to his mom's his mom's arms after a loss. We saw that USC team rally in a bowl game behind a quarterback that threw 6 touchdown passes, screaming and chanting, "We finally have a real quarterback." Maybe there's some offseason stuff. Maybe Caleb Williams is actually a decent kid. I don't know. I've never had the chance to talk to him personally, obviously. Didn't participate at the combines, not leaking his medicals. There's plenty of reasons why maybe Chicago gets cold feet and passes. Or maybe you just don't love the Chicago fit. What do you make of Jaden Daniels going in front of Caleb Williams?
So I'm going to put out in our group chat afterwards. He came out and he vouched why he did this, and I 100% agree with his thing. And I want to make sure we give a shout out. He said that the supporting cast there in Washington, where Jaden Daniels is projected to go, is probably better overall than where Caleb Williams is. Plus, you got the rushing upside there, which is a lot higher than Jaden Daniels, with Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. So when it comes to fantasy wise, I could definitely see this. Jaden Daniels has a huge arm. He's got the rushing upside, and I definitely could vouch for this. I do like this pick. I think it's really preference on who do you think, which new coaching, I guess that. Which coaching staff can build around this quarterback quicker and get him to the next level quicker? That's where you have to go when it comes to these two.
So here's my thing on that is if you think back just a few years ago to the Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Justin Fields draft, right? If you were in a super flex draft and Trevor Lawrence was not the first pick taken in that draft, I'm sure it raised a lot of eyebrows. Trevor Lawrence was the talent in that class. Everybody was saying, hey, Trevor Lawrence is that guy, right? So had somebody have taken Mac Jones. Now, in hindsight, Trevor Lawrence hasn't been great, but he's the only quarterback in that class worth a damn at this point. So, again, not saying I think Jaden Daniels is a Zach Wilson or Trey Lance. I'm just simply saying I just think the generational talent, which I know that's thrown around a lot lately, which you and I have talked about recently, is Caleb Williams. He's got to get drafted 101. I think if you're in a super flex league, you can't really afford to get cute. If you're that undecided about which player to take, Caleb Williams is the only answer in the super flex for me, Brant. And if you don't think that's the right answer and you own the 101, auction that pick off and get yourself a king's ransom. Let somebody else get Caleb Williams, drop back a few spots, and then take whatever quarterback you may like. Because I like plenty of the quarterbacks in this draft. I just don't love them as much as I think Caleb Williams is going to be. I think Caleb Williams has got a chance to be good long-term as well as early. When you send him into the NFL right off the jump with, Cole Kmet, Keenan Allen, and DJ Moore, he's walking into a pretty darn good receiving core. So I think Caleb Williams has a chance to put up rookie numbers right off the bat. My concern with Jaden Daniels, small frame, some of the hits he took, how long does that last in the NFL when you got guys like, just the NFL defensive linemen in general, like Jalen Carter, I don't know. Anyway, Brant, you had the 103, Marvin Harrison, first non-quarterback off the board. Walk us through that pick.
So I took this. I know the talk is Malik Neighbors maybe, pass him with the best the best wide receiver in this class. I went Marvin Harrison, and here's why. It has a lot to do with what he has around him. I don't know what team he's going to be at. There's all sorts of things up in the air. I have no idea. What's around him? His dad played 13 professional years. I don't think he missed more than maybe 2 or 3 games a year. So he knows his dad is there to help him stay healthy, to get him through the workouts. He's got great community around him with his family and everything else. This kid has played some of the best ball there at Ohio State. I think I don't want to throw this out because, like you said, we've been talking about this generational talent being thrown out. I believe that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best wide receiver in this class. I think he has the overall all-around skills. He has the great supporting cast. Now, could I see, landing spot differ and change this a little bit? Maybe. But as of right now, I believe Marvin Harrison, watching the film that I have, is the best wide receiver in this class.
Okay. Yeah, you can throw out generational talent with him as well, Brant. Him, Caleb Williams, and Brock Bowers have been being talked about for the last couple of years as, hey, these guys are coming up. They're generational talents. And they're not all at the same position. So it's fine. I think the one position we don't have a generational talent at this point is running back in this class. Because
had that
again,
last year.
generational talent is thrown around real loosely now, and it doesn't necessarily mean what it used to. So I think it's fitting here. So, all right. Speaking of the aforementioned Malik Neighbors, he did go at 104. The 105 was my pick. I took Drake May out of UNC, and then at 106 was the other generational talent, the tight end Brock Bowers out of Georgia. So let's talk about these three picks first. So obviously we'll skip the Drake May pick for just a second. The 104 Malik Neighbors makes a lot of sense to me. Obviously he's going to fall right after Marvin Harrison, probably in most mock drafts and most actual rookie drafts. Makes sense. I get it. Don't have a whole lot to say there. The only difference again is if this guy ends up going, if the Buffalo Bills trade up and select him early, and he goes to the Bills and Marvin Harrison goes to
the Cardinals.
I don't know, the Cardinals, then maybe you make the argument that Malik Neighbors is better. Maybe. Brock Bowers at 106. Again, if he happens to go to any of the two teams that he's been listed with in connection with the Chargers or the Cincinnati Bengals, again, I think he skyrockets as well at that point, Brant. So I've got no problems with either Neighbors or Bowers in the spots they're at now. I think both of those could jockey a little bit, which we had to do. You have a question here. Jumbo does ask if Marvin Harrison Jr. lands for Arizona, Neighbors lands in LA, which do you take? I assume that's the Chargers. Again, that's one of those spots. Like if you put Neighbors where he's going to walk into the season as a one, whether it be Buffalo, LA, where he's got a very competent quarterback with him. Not that I dislike Kyler Murray as a fantasy quarterback, but that does vault Neighbors. It's close enough for me that it vaults Neighbors over him in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially that you get me a number one wide receiver with Justin Herbert, and you're starting to talk about him jumping Marvin Harrison. There's two wide receivers in this class that could have the potential to do that. We'll talk about the other one here shortly.
So again, back to the 105, Drake May out of UNC. I did take him here again, super flex. It was one of those things for me is there was another name that, again, like you just mentioned, there's a wide receiver I really wanted to take here, but I just couldn't see myself letting Drake May slide much further in a super flex. I do think Drake May has some of the most raw talent in this class, could be the more traditional NFL long-term career starter. I don't think he's got he's not going to be a generational Patrick Mahomes. He's not going to be, anything like that, but he could be a Justin Herbert type where he gets drafted a little bit later, or not a little bit later, but not the first quarterback off the board, but ends up being a household name in a few years that people want to own in fantasy communities. So there we go.
As you're sitting there at the 105, in my mind, you're sitting at the 105 in a 10-person league. It is a 10-person PPR league. You're probably sitting with a good number one QB on your roster. And you just hit the nail on the head. Drake May could be your QB2 for a long term. So I absolutely do love this pick at the 105. 104, 105, 106 area for Drake May is absolutely phenomenal, especially if you have that. Let's say Justin Herbert got hurt. You have Herbert coming back. Let's add Drake May. We know we have two guys that are going to throw for 250 yards probably every single week.
Sure. Yep. All right, we're gonna finish out the last four picks of the first round here. 107, Rome Odunze from Washington. Number 108, Brian Thomas out of LSU. 109, Xavier Worthy out of Texas. And then all the way down at the 110 is where we see J.J. McCarthy come off the board. Surprises, concerns here, Brant?
Rome is one of the guys that I could see jumping into the 105, 106 area. He is the other wide receiver I could see if he gets thrown into LA, that there could be some talk of him being the best wide receiver to be drafted in his class. I still don't think he has the talent level to be the best wideout, but he could end up with the best landing spot. Brian Thomas, I don't know a whole lot about. I've watched little film on him. I've read a little bit about him. The one issue I have is the 109. And I'm sorry, this is my pops that took this, so I'm going to bag on you a little bit. This guy is the one thing that's saying, oh, he was speed demon at the combine. I think he's jumping in. to the first round a lot more. I think this is a guy that you could end up seeing slide out of the first round of the NFL draft. Could end up being a late second round draft pick. You could be talking about this guy sliding into late second rounds of rookie mocks or rookie drafts. So this is the only question mark I have is he is really landing spot dependent. I honestly believe if he doesn't get a competent quarterback, I don't know if he's really worth a first round draft pick. JJ McCarthy, I think, needs to be higher.
Yeah. So swinging on the 109, Xavier Worthy, I don't have a problem with this because this could be one of those picks that he could move down if he goes to a really bad spot, but if he goes to a great spot, he could go way up. If you look at kind of the way the NFL is going and the way they're using speedy players nowadays, Xavier Worthy's got a chance to be worth something fantasy wise. If you think back to like the Tavon Austin days where it was like, hey, he's fast, let's put him in punt return, kickoff return. No, these guys are trying to get him into the offense, whether it's be end rounds. I mean, just Mike McDaniel has like really shown what you can do with speed in the NFL with Miami Dolphins. So I don't necessarily have a problem with Xavier Worthy at the 109 at this point. Like you said, it could jockey quite a bit. I do have a huge problem with JJ McCarthy falling to 10 because I do think he goes top 4 in the NFL draft. And if he's walking in to start day 1 in the NFL landscape, there's a chance he has to go higher, especially in a super flex. But I understand it. The numbers aren't there. The film isn't there on him just because he came from a college where Jim Harbaugh ran the hell out of the football, and he didn't have to put his talents on display too awful much. So I get the hesitancy there. I get it. All right. So first round recap of this draft, Brant. 101, Jaden Daniels. 102, Caleb Williams. 103, Marvin Harrison. 104, Malik Neighbors. 105, Drake May. 106, Brock Bowers. 107, Romo Dunze. 108, Brian Thomas. 109, Xavier Worthy. And at 10, JJ McCarthy. Moving into the second round, the first 3 picks go as follows.
Do the first 4 here.
Do the first 4 here. All right, yes, first 4 here. 201, Adonai Mitchell out of Texas. 202, Trey Benson out of FSU. You took Michael Penix at the 203 out of Washington, and then at 204 was Jonathan Brooks out of Texas.
Okay, so this Mitchell's the guy that I could see getting into the first round over Worthy, possibly over Brian Thomas. I like Mitchell coming out. I know that, it's not all there. I do like him as a wide receiver. I think he could easily slide into a wide receiver 1 spot on a needy team. I don't think he's going to be exploding. I think you're going to see him to be if he does slide into a spot, I think you're going to see him be a decent 10 to 15 point type of guy. This is one of my favorite picks. I honestly, at the 201 is almost a steal. And the reason I ask you to do the 4 is I think Jonathan Brooks is the best running back in this class. I think Trey Benson is number 2. I think you flip-flop those. I'll let you tell me what you think of this, and then I'll dig into my pick a little bit more.
Yeah, so for me, I think running back's an absolute crapshoot in this draft. Honestly, Rant, I think it's going to be 100% landing spot dependent. I don't think there's any of these guys in this class that are by far and away, just in a different tier all themselves. I think the argument could be made for Jonathan Brooks had he have not torn his ACL or his Achilles, whichever it was. But we don't know what he's going to look like when he comes back from that. So that is like a thing for me that holds me back on him. And then we're going to talk about a guy a little bit later that I don't want to necessarily get too much into, but I think Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin is a guy that I think if he goes to the right spot could be the number 1 running back in this class. So running back's a complete utter crapshoot for me. I don't have him necessarily in any kind of concrete ranking right now. Yeah, I have my preferences, but as the dominoes fall in the NFL draft, just because you're the first running back drafted doesn't mean we're going to like the landing spot the best. Because listen, if you get drafted and end up going to Green Bay behind Josh Jacobs, who just went and signed a deal and then they re-signed AJ Dillon, like I'm not going to like that as much as if the Dallas Cowboys draft somebody. So like plenty of room for these running backs to change. I could see running back. We didn't have a running back go in the first round of this startup draft, Brant. After the NFL draft, there will be a running back that will go in the first round. There may be 2. There's some landing spots out there that I think running backs can go to that instantly bump that stock. The Chargers have the spot open right now. The Raiders still do. Zamir White really isn't all that proven. And then obviously if a running back signs with the Dallas Cowboys, instant bump into the top 10, I would say. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. I think that will be a difference maker. So let's talk about the 203 with Michael Penix. Tell me where your head was at when you took Michael Penix off the board here.
This guy, I think, is going to be a huge arm guy. He's going to be able to push the ball down the field. You're not going to get the Konami code. You're not going to get the rushing upside with him. He's smart enough to get out of the pocket when needed. He's going to be, in my mind, as long as he can stay healthy. Yes, question mark is all on the injuries with him. He stays healthy, and I think he's a long-term. I know his age isn't there, but I think if he slides into a starting spot such as Denver or competes there in Tennessee, or I know I'm missing some other spots that need QBs. I think he's a day one starter at a possibility, and I really think that he could turn up. And I think this is a guy that could end up creeping into the first round if he becomes a day one starter.
Okay. No, I don't have a problem with Michael Penix for fantasy. I know I didn't want him for my Atlanta Falcons, but for fantasy, I think there's a chance.
I don't want him for the Seahawks either. I wish him the best, and I will cheer for him. But I don't want the injury history.
There's plenty of quarterback needy teams right now that are talking about drafting a quarterback. You got the New York Giants who aren't in love with Daniel Jones, but his contract has him where they can't get rid of him. So it'd be a camp battle. You got the Denver Broncos that are wide open. You've got the Minnesota Vikings that are wide open. And then obviously your top three teams with your Washington, New England, and Chicago. So there's going to be some spots where these guys fall. And it's like, hey, wait a minute. Michael Penix is a lot more intriguing than he was 5 minutes ago. So I got no problem with that. No qualms, no quarrels. All right, so going to the 205, I was on the board. I took Blake Corum, 206, Troy Franklin out of Oregon, and then at 207, his partner there in Bo Nix. So what do you make of the two Oregon players going back-to-back in the 6th and the 7th round?
I absolutely love your pick. That's all I'm going to say on that one right now. I can throw my 2 cents in after you're done. Bo Nix scares the living crap out of me. It took him bouncing all around to finally get a go at it. So he scares me, and he still scares me. It's a super flex league, and that's probably the next best quarterback off the board. So I don't hate the spot. Franklin, this is a heavy wide receiver team or a heavy wide receiver draft. So this is a very good spot for him. I could see a name that we'll talk about here later in the 2nd round, jumping him. But it's not a bad pick there. Late 2nd round for him is a good area right now.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have already said that Troy Franklin is this year's Puka Nacua. So just because of the similarity in stats and some of the separation and things they were able to accomplish in college. So there's that. Bo Nix, again, same thing. The argument I make for Michael Penix. He goes to one of these spots where he's walking in with a chance to be a day one starter. He's probably in a super flex. He's probably an early 2nd round pick or a 1st round pick, not the 207 probably. Again, this is based on talent right now. I would have him and Michael Penix in a tier. Coin flip, I don't care either way. I just think a left-handed quarterback's weird in the NFL. It just doesn't feel like it works. Steve Young would tell me I'm wrong, but there you go. Excuse me. At 208, we had Keon Coleman out of FSU, 209, Ladd McConkey out of Georgia, and 210, Xavier Leggett out of South Carolina. I will say first and foremost, Brant, I think Xavier Leggett and Ladd McConkey skyrocket up this draft board. I think both of these guys gain steam as we head into the full circle of the actual NFL draft. And then afterwards, I think these guys both at worst are drafted where they're at right now. Keon Coleman's the one that I'm a little iffy about. I think Keon Coleman could fall out of the top 2 rounds. His route tree wasn't as good as what we thought it was going to be. There's been some flaws that has been found when people have watched film and broken it down on him. So I think there's a chance Keon Coleman slips a little bit. Again, landing spot with him is going to be dependent. He was talked about early as one of the top 3 wide receivers, like real early going into this college football season. He was going to be one of the guys. He's obviously since fallen out. But yeah, what do you make of the 3 wide receivers in the draft?
Coleman scares the crap out of me, just like you said. The thing that came out late last year before the draft was Quentin Johnston with the drop issue. Coleman has the same issues coming into this draft. I don't trust him. Even if he goes to Kansas City, I don't know if I trust him just because that entire wide receiver core last year was dropping passes left and right. I understand they won the Super Bowl, but I don't know. Coleman scares me. He would have to instantly be a starter with not a whole lot of competition behind him, i.e. Buffalo. for me to start considering him to be a mid-second round draft pick.
Mhm.
So the other two, I absolutely leave. I could see McConkey jumping up into the middle of that second round, nice and easy, right behind that Blake Corum pick over Troy Franklin. I like McConkey.
Okay, so real quick recap: 201 Adonai Mitchell, 202 Trey Benson, 203 Michael Penix, 204 Michael Brooks, 205 Blake Corum, 206 Troy Franklin, 207 Bo Nix, 208 Keon Coleman, 209 Lad McConkey, and 210 Xavier Leggett. Now, if you draft early in your home leagues, Brant, as soon as the NFL draft is out, most of us probably didn't have Puka Nacua real high on our list last year. He went in our home league. He went in the 4th round. I know a couple of us liked him more, but we just didn't have picks that fell in the right spot. He ended up being the best pick of almost the entire draft, let alone in the 4th round. So if you're doing a 2-round rookie draft, obviously there's going to be talent that doesn't get drafted, Brant. Who's the name that didn't go in this 2 rounds for you that you're like, man, I would love to find a way to have that guy in my team?
Roman Wilson out of Michigan. He ran a 4.39 40. He's 5'11", 185 pounds. He had 48 receptions, 789 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 16.4 yards per catch. Yeah, he does lack the size a little bit, but we're starting to see that in the NFL, the smaller wide receivers being able to do it. He has huge burst speed. His 40 split, I think it was like 1.57 in the first 10 yards or something. It was crazy. His cone drill was good. His shuttle run was good. He has a great route tree. He has great, strong hands for a receiver of his size. I really feel like if he goes to a spot where he is going to be the slot guy, I think this is a guy that you're going to be talking about just filling the voids in the middle of the defense and finding the gaps in the zone. And he's going to be a 5 to 7 catch per game guy that you could possibly see, such as a Hunter Renfrow or Julian Edelman-esque type wide receiver.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you completely here, Brant. I think Roman Wilson's definitely one of my favorite later. When I say later round wide receivers, he's not going to go in the 1st round of the actual NFL draft. He will go 2nd or 3rd round. But he's absolutely one of my favorite wide receivers that goes late. I think he's going to be a bona fide stud. I think he could be like a souped up version of Hunter Renfrow in 2019 was that the year of Hunter Renfrow? This could be another Adam Thielen-esque player that's just super crafty in the slot, makes really good contested catches, fights for an additional yards. Probably not going to be a touchdown monster in the NFL, but he could be a PPR monster. I love Roman Wilson out of Michigan. I did go with another running back here, Brent, because I did it low-hanging fruit. It's too easy because any of these running backs go to the right spot. They're going to be superstars. I took Jalen Wright out of the University of Tennessee. He ran a 4.38 40, so a little bit faster even than Roman Wilson at the wide receiver position. This is a guy that played for the University of Tennessee. He had 137 carries last year. Excuse me. 1,013 yards in the SEC, but only 4 touchdowns, which I think is really one of those things that's holding him back a little bit. He did show that he was versatile in the pass catching game, 22 receptions for 141 yards. Again, if you're only getting 4 touchdowns, that's going to hold people back a little bit. But we know Joe Melton and the Tennessee Volunteers were like a aired out, ball down the field, explosive play kind of team, so he wasn't probably getting a whole lot of looks around the goal line. It is disconcerting to only see 4, but I think this is a running back again that if he's the one that is drafted by the Dallas Cowboys, Brant, not only does he go from undrafted in this mock draft, but he ends up being a 1st-round pick in actual rookie drafts. So there's plenty of talent out there if you do your research past the first 10 names on the board. We may even do a little special episode at some point talking about some later round guys that we like in the NFL draft that could be this year's Puka Nacua, if you will.
Absolutely. And don't forget about Spencer Rattler. I was throwing 2 names out there, Spencer Rattler and Joe Melton. Those guys could be guys that you're talking about. Okay, so they're sitting behind a veteran. They're sitting behind a Kirk Cousins. They're sitting behind, a Derek Carr. I wonder what they're sitting up there in Seattle waiting for Geno to pass the torch to either Sam Howell or this guy. These are guys that you could steal. Those 2 guys right there are going to be steals late in drafts. And I think one of those 2 is going to blow the top off of his ADP. Eventually, you may have to wait on them. Those are the guys that you sit on your taxis. But yeah, I do like that idea of possibly getting in and talking about some late round flyers.
Absolutely, and we will do that at some point. I think the next thing we're going to come out with, Brant, is a buy sell episode. Some guys we want to target prior to the draft. Some guys that we're like, hey, this is going to change bad. Let's see if we can capitalize on some value before the draft starts. So that's probably what we're coming out with next. I think that pretty well sums it up for today, Brant.
Yeah, absolutely. That sums it up. Don't forget, we'll be live. I think we said next week we'll be live with the buy sell, and then we'll be coming at you with the draft coming up, and then we'll be doing some more mock drafts, a little deeper mock drafts after the draft, breaking down some of these fits and everything else. So stay tuned with us, guys. We're going to be talking about these rookies a lot more, really digging into this dynasty time and talking about some late round flyers. But as always, stay hungry,
stay fat, my friends.